Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Issues in Environmental Science, team presentation version. So today we're going to be hearing from the Bad Beaches, the Turtle Protection Squad, and Team Tidal. And each team, we have, so since we only have 3 teams signed up, they'll have a little bit more time. We still have several teams that have not signed up, or at least one that hasn't signed up. And I'm a little concerned that we may end up with like 5 presentations during a session, which is going to mean that we won't have quite enough time. So let me, I'll remind you that I'll be grading this according to the rubric. And here is the rubric I'm using. So this is the rubric for the class presentation and the slides. And you need to speak clearly. You need to make eye contact, which means looking at the camera. Explain the topics thoroughly. Be careful of your online presence. Make sure that extraneous noise is muted. Make sure that one person has the presentation loaded up. All of the members of the team should unmute their video camera, but mute their audio until they're ready to speak. And then when it's your turn to speak within your team, you will please indicate to the person controlling the slides when you're ready to go on to the next slide by just saying, "Next slide, please," or something like that. So that's the oral presentation style. Your slide should be informative, attractive, well organized. There should be some flow from one slide to the next. Don't have too much text in the slide. I think we've already given you these topics, these pointers. You can make jokes, but try to keep it to a minimum. Be prepared to explain graphs and data thoroughly. And the slides, you should have an introduction slide and a concluding slide with take-home points. The team participation, it's advisable if all members participate, but some people may or may not be able to participate, so you can have a smaller number than you actually have team members. But those who don't participate should be prepared to answer questions and should make, have made more of a contribution to organizing the PowerPoint and other aspects of the team assignment. And good presentation should demonstrate in-depth knowledge of the topic. There should be a clear storyline and conclusions, and make sure to explain continent societal relevance. Okay, at this time, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'll ask all the members of Bad Beaches to please unmute your video and be ready to take it away. Bad Beaches.
Yeah, I'm gonna be sharing my screen, Dr. McDonald. So can I be co-host, please? Okay, you guys can see this. Can you see this?
Not yet. There we go. Perfect.
Awesome. Okay.
Wait a minute. When it was there and then it went away. There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Take it away.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly, and we are the Bad Beaches. Today, we're going to present information on the anthropogenic impacts and conservation methods in Elephas maximus, or common name Asian elephants. Next slide, please. Mason is going to start us off by introducing the Asian elephants, and Mimi is going to tell us about the ecology. I'm going to discuss the current population of Asian elephants. Paige is going to talk about the anthropogenic impact in Asian elephants. And lastly, Vanessa is going to discuss the conservation of the species. So without further ado, Mason, you can introduce the Asian elephant to us.
All right, hi guys. My name is Mason, and sorry, next slide. All right, so Elephas maximus, which is the scientific name for the Asian elephant, was discovered in 1758 by Carol Linnaeus, and over the next century, 3 subspecies were then recognized and categorized as E. maximus indicus, E. maximus maximus, and E. maximus sumatranus. So these subspecies primarily differentiate due to geological separation. And, they've got some minor, smaller differences, morphological and anatomical, for example. And Elephas maximus sumatranus is found in Sumatra. E. maximus indicus is found on Asia's mainland, and E. maximus maximus is found in Sri Lanka. And then this is just the taxonomy real quick, right there by Carol Linnaeus. So next slide, please. All right, so the morphological characteristics. Asian elephants' morphological characteristics are fairly impressive. The sheer size alone of Asian elephants makes them the largest land mammal in Asia. They can stand up to 4 meters tall, which is 13 feet. And their skin is characteristically gray to brown, but this can vary by subspecies. The most notable or distinctive characteristics of elephants, regardless of African or Asian, is the trunk. So the scientific name for the trunk is the proboscis, and it may look relatively simple, but it contains over 150,000 muscle units, and it's used for numerous tasks in the wild. So primarily, we've observed Asian elephants using their trunk for lifting water to their mouths, breathing, eating, sensing pheromones, and identifying vibrations in the ground, such as movement of nearby animals and such. Asian elephants are also sexually dimorphic, which essentially means that they have physical characteristics that can be used to differentiate male and females aside from sexual organs. So in Asian elephants, the males are typically larger, as you can see in figure 3, and they have tusks. This larger size of the males kind of leads into our next slide, because they require, being such large mammals, they require expansive land. So geographic range, they can be found in 13 countries across Asia, most notable of these being India, Sri Lanka, and Sumatra. As I mentioned before, the 3 subspecies are named after those. And over the last century alone, Asian elephants have been forced to downsize to 15% of their original territory. This subsequently resulted in a loss of 50% of the Asian elephant's population. And this can all be directly linked to human conflict. So human-elephant conflict has been a primary factor in the elephant's reduction of geographic range, and the most common human-elephant conflicts are typically human settlement or infrastructure within or interrupting elephant habitat. So fragmentation is a massive cause of reduction of geological range. And that's it. And now Mimi.
Yes. Hi, guys. So I'm going to be talking about the ecology, and then I'm also going to be diving in just a little bit to Asian elephants' relationship to humans. So you can do next slide. Right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the habitat of Asian elephants. This is a little bit different than their geographical range, because it's not just where they live. It's what kind of areas are actually viable habitats for these animals. So you can see here, this is a nice picture that I really like to refer to, because it's a good place to get a mental image of where viable habitat is. So the thing about Asian elephants is they're pretty generalist in the fact that they can live in a variety of different habitats, including tropical forests, deciduous forests, and then also shrub and grasslands. And then there's also some other factors that go into what makes a viable habitat for these species, such as proximity to humans, which is obviously a problem because humans are increasingly encroaching on their habitat. So we're seeing a huge decrease in viable habitat for these species. Could do next slide. Right. So the other thing that relates to the types of habitats that they live in is what do they eat? And this is connected to their habitats because although most Asian elephants eat a majority of grass, the percentage of how much grass takes up their diet depends on where they live. So if they're in a grassland or a shrubland, they're obviously going to consume a lot more grass than if they're living in a forest. And then besides grass, they also eat things like fruit or roots or bark. And we want to understand their diet because their diet relates to how they interact with their habitat. They act as vegetation managers. So essentially, they control the amount of vegetation in their habitats, which is crucial, and a relationship that they have to their abiotic habitats. And then you can do next slide. Right. And so the other reason that we want to talk about their diet is one of the biggest or the bigger reasons why they're so important, and that relates to why they are classified as keystone species. So I said before, they eat fruit as well as other plants, and a lot of the plants that they eat have seeds in them. So after these animals eat these seeds, they ingest them, and then eventually they deposit these seeds in their dung, I guess is a scientific word for it. But what's interesting about it is it actually helps seed dispersal. And that's one of the reasons why they're so important to their habitats, is because they take these seeds and they move them around and they increase seed dispersal. They also increase the likelihood that these seeds will germinate. So if a seed passes through an elephant's digestive tract, it's more likely to germinate. So Asian elephants acting as seed dispersal managers is really important, because as forest fragmentation increases due to humans, other methods of seed dispersal is not going to be as effective. So something like wind might not be enough to actually disperse seeds. So we're going to see in the future that Asian elephants acting as as seed dispersal members becoming increasingly important. You can do next slide. Right. So basically, all of what I said before is talking about why they're important for their habitats. Why they help vegetation or why they help disperse seeds. But there's also other reasons that we care about conserving these species. And one of those is their cultural significance. So not only are they significant for the ecology of their habitats, there's also a huge connection between humans and elephants, and this relationship goes back centuries. Archaeologists have found evidence of elephant-human relationships all the way back into the Indus Valley civilizations. Signs that there was domestication of Asian elephants going back thousands and thousands of years. There's also large religious importance of Asian elephants. For example, in Buddhist or Hindu mythology, we see examples of elephants used symbolically. On the right, you can see a little graph I made just about like what Asian elephants might symbolize to different cultures. And so for countries like Thailand, especially, or Laos or India, there's a huge cultural significance for Asian elephants. So this is another reason why we should care about conserving these species, not only for their ecological importance, but also their cultural importance in conserving that culture is something that we should ethically care about. Yep, that's it. You can do next slide.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the current population of Asian elephants. Next slide, please. Okay, populations of Asian elephants are found in grasslands, forests, and shrublands, primarily in Thailand, India, Myanmar, Indonesia, and China. And Thailand is estimated to have fewer than 10,000 elephants, and China is estimated to have less than 250 elephants. And although these are estimates of the elephant populations in these countries, it's difficult for scientists to collect accurate data regarding the elephant populations, especially in areas with dense vegetation and difficult terrain, which make certain measuring techniques incompetent. So that makes it challenging to find recent population numbers of Asian elephants. And many of the data available are from before 2010. Next slide, please. All right, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, also known as the IUCN, declared the Asian elephant endangered on their red list of threatened species first in 1986. And since that declaration, the Asian elephant population has declined at least by 50% over the last 3 elephant generations, which is about 60 to 75 years. Next slide, please. Some of the main threats causing the population numbers to diminish come from human-elephant conflict. An example of this is when herds of these like colossal elephants come waltzing through developed areas and farmland that were most likely once wild areas in which elephants could travel freely. But now when they go through these areas, they come in contact with humans and their land and roads and homes, and especially their crops. For example, in China, many people secure their livelihood by growing pineapples, rubber trees, sugarcane, or bamboo, which are crops that are commonly raided by elephants. And since these crops are their source of income, basically they will stop at nothing to get rid of the elephants. So that definitely disturbs the population numbers. Paige is going to discuss some of these in more detail. Hold on, I just lost my page. Okay. Yeah, Paige is going to discuss more of these in detail, but other factors that have caused the Asian elephant populations to drastically decrease and have caused the species to become more endangered over the years are low genetic diversity, illegal wildlife trade, poaching, and habitat fragmentation. And that's what I have.
Okay, so I'm going to be going over anthropogenic impacts on Asian elephants. Next. So one of the first things I want to talk about is habitat loss and fragmentation. As an increase in human population, or as populations of humans are increasing, they're settling into areas that used to be habitats for elephants. This is directly causing habitat loss because they're getting killed, as Kelly stated before. The way that they go about killing them is either through electrocution or poison. And in this figure, it says that elephants have lost about 70% of their native habitat. Next, sorry. So the next thing is illegal trade and poaching. So not all Asian elephants actually have tusks, but they are still traded for their skin, molars, bones. And when they do have tusks, they're trading whole tusk. 3,494 pieces of ivory were found in Mongolia at a market. 200 were found in 2009, and then 3,294 were found in between 2013 and 2014. This is indicating the emergence of Myanmar into the ivory trade business starting in 2013. And during those years, they made an estimate of $1.2 million in ivory sales. This is also causing genetic issues because selective poaching is leading to skewed sex ratios. Next. So this is about circus elephants. So after a ban was passed in Los Angeles about using bull hooks or elephant guides, a lot of specifically the Ringling Bros Circus stopped using circus elephants, and they created a center for elephant conservation in southern Florida. It's a 200-acre retirement home and breeding center for circus elephants. And they are actually sending 30 of their elephants to another conservation center in Florida, in Jacksonville, called the White Oak Conservation Center. And in this picture, the figure, you can see there's 2 elephants, and they have some scars. It's kind of sad, but.
Okay, about 2 minutes left.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm just going to quickly talk about this then. It's just the conservation, and most of this was actually discussed. Kelly had discussed already that the ICUN Red List has labeled E. maximus as endangered, and so they are protected in this case. But quickly, there are some problems, as we have learned in this class too, with international protection. And here is a figure where you can see, again, taken from the Red List, what we still need as to with the E. maximus conservation. And so it's more about domestic conservation real quickly. A lot of countries have have designated land to E. maximus populations for in like wild park reserves. So here in Nepal, they have done that with the National Park and Wildlife Conservation Act of 1973. Again, quickly in Thai, as Mimi had said, again, they hold a cultural significance as well as a historical significance. And they have a Thai Elephant Conservation Center in that called the TEC, TECC for short. And they have the most significant feature about this is the mobile elephant clinic, because elephants are a migratory species. So this is very, very beneficial to them. So here are some quick pictures about what the TECC looks like with rehabilitation and the mobility clinic. And the last thing that's kind of a little sad, but the conservation, they're adapting. Their tusks are shortening over time. So it's kind of like an anthropogenic evolution in a sense, where we see this morphological change, and the poaching is the impact. We are the impact, and it's happening at human lifespan scale. So it's happening at a very fast rate, which is the big issue and the crazy part about it. But overall, it's mostly, we've been talking about elephants as a system, especially with their vegetation changes and also their seed dispersal. We also should talk about their anthropogenic impacts as a system, which Jackson et al., this famous paper is in Conservation, and it's basically the idea that overall these effects are larger than just the individual anthropogenic impacts. And we don't even know what elephants look like without human impact, because impact has been going on for so long. So we just have another quick input on future methods is just more research is needed to required. We need to start shifting from an ecological species baseline management to an ecological management, a precautionary approach, and we also need internal cooperation. Again, sorry to quickly go through that, but that is it. Thank you guys so much. Is there any questions or quickly? I know we ran out of time and we apologize.
No, you're fine. You still have a minute or two for questions. Any questions from the class?
What are your?
Go ahead, Joseph.
Do you have the questions for the test on your PowerPoint by any chance?
I thought we were gonna do that via Canvas, right? Isn't that gonna be a
Yeah,
quiz?
we can do it in Canvas. That'll work.
Oh, okay. I didn't know whether or not to put it on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I wasn't clear about that. It doesn't hurt to put it on the PowerPoint, but I'll post it to you.
Okay. Oh, I am so sorry. I was not under the.
Yeah, well, that's my fault. I should have been clearer about that. But we'll post the questions.
Okay, cool.
Well, thanks, Joseph. So sorry. Sorry about that. But any other questions that we have? I know this is visual evidence of evolution too, which is kind of an interesting concept to talk about. But
can the subspecies, I mean, is this happening with African elephants as well, that the shortening of the tusks, because they're also heavily poached and for ivory?
It's actually happening more so in the African elephants than in Asian elephants, because again, Mason did discuss this about there's this tuskers female African elephants also produce tusk more likely in African elephants than they do in Asian elephants. So yeah, it's more occurring in African elephants, but it's still prevalent in Asian elephants.
I have a question. What is the data collection method for the evidence of them losing their tusks? Are they going out and counting the elephants in the wild, or are they tagging them in zoos?
Yeah, it's the TECC does this method where they measure a ton of morphological characteristics about them. They measure their skull size, their even wounds too, which Paige was talking about too. They do that also in the elephant circus. They'll measure tusk size. So over time, they have seen this shortening in their tusk.
Okay, cool.
If I could also add on to that, just for Asian elephant demographic in general, a 2019 study by Goswami et al. And stuff, they actually used one of the most successful demographic studies to date. So they use a combination of capture recapture models and photographic sampling. And so the combination of that creates a more trustworthy manner of tracking down and narrowing down population parameters. So that was done within India's, I think it's Kaziranga National Park, but basically that has set like the new precedent for, trustworthy tracking, because as we mentioned before, it is difficult to measure population parameters of such a migratory species.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there for the bad beaches, but the bad beaches did a great job. So thank you.
All right.
All right, next up is the Turtle Protection Squad. So if you guys would please unmute your camera, and whoever is sharing, go ahead and share the PowerPoint.
I'm going to be sharing the screen here.
Great, Joseph. All right, well, hello, turtles. And yes, I see your slide. All right, so go ahead.
All right, so we are going to be doing a project here on plastic debris in the ocean and its negative impact on sea turtles. And I'm going to start off here with the plastic types and pathways. So plastic is just a nickname for polymers that are made of chains of carbon. And production began for plastic in the 1950s. And it became really popular and replaced a bunch of other things because it's really cheap to make, and it's durable and it's lightweight. And the United States, sorry, not United States, not United Nations Environmental Protection Agency, they predicted that currently plastic is being produced at around 311 million tons per year, and that's expected to increase to 2 billion tons per year by 2050 if this continues. You can see this here in this graph. The next thing is the types of plastic. So the most common type of plastic produced is polyethylene, which is important. You might want to remember that later. The second most produced is polyethylene terephthalate. The third is polypropylene, and the fourth is polyethylene chloride, or PVC. And you can see in this graph here that all the different ways that we use plastic here. But the most important thing when you take away from this is that about 50% of the plastic that we make is for single-use purposes. Here's some more things about each type of plastic that I mentioned. Polyethylene is used in packaging film and grocery bags mainly, so single-use items that float in the ocean surface because it's less dense than seawater. Polyethylene terephthalate is mainly used in like water bottles. Polypropylene is also less dense than seawater, so it floats, and is used in nylon rope and bottle caps. And polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, is used in construction and toys and piping. And lastly, some pathways here that plastic takes. So plastic can be taken to the ocean in 3 ways. It can be illegally dumped, unintentionally lost, or run off through our water system. So plastic that's in landfills that receives a lot of sunlight will degrade into microplastics, which can be flown into the ocean. And anytime that we use like dishwashing soap or something like that, or when we wash our clothes, those microplastic beads in there can also get into the ocean that way. And also storms and things like that can just blow a lot of plastic into the ocean on accident. And I'm going to hang it over to Casey here, who's going to talk about characteristics of plastic in the ocean.
All right, so first off, how much plastic is really in the ocean? It's estimated that there are more than 5 trillion plastic particles found globally, along with 46,000 pieces in every square mile of the ocean. Each day, about 8 million pieces of plastic are added. The amount of plastic already outweighs the amount of plankton, and if we continue out the rate we're going, in about 30 years, it's predicted that the amount of plastic will outweigh the amount of fish. Next slide, please. So plastic degradation. A key part of raising awareness on plastic pollution is being conscious of the amount of time it takes for items to degrade. So I listed some of the most common polluted items. So plastic bags we use daily take 10 years to 1,000 years to decompose. Plastic bottles can take 450 years or more. Paper can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to break down, and glass, if improperly disposed of, can take up to 1,000,000 years to decompose. And over to the right, I put up a chart of some other commonly polluted items and just how long they take to degrade. Next slide, please. So this covers some of the consequences of ingestion of plastic for turtles. While all these plastics start off large, they become extremely harmful once they break down into smaller particles. Once the plastics have broken down, they can be easily ingested by sea animals, causing illness, mutations, and even death. They travel easier and therefore can be transportation for invasive species. And over to the left, I put up a little chart of some microplastic molecules. These, once the plastic is broken down into smaller pieces, can release toxic additives to the food chain and negatively impact the turtles. Next slide, please. Some more consequences of plastic ingestion are with the intensity of plastic pollution in the global oceans. It's no shocker that over half the world's sea turtle population has ingested plastic. An estimated hundreds of thousands of sea turtles die each year, either due to becoming tangled in plastic debris or because of plastic ingestion. And over to the left, I posted some pretty striking images I saw of how plastic can affect sea turtles. Next slide. If a turtle happens to get caught within plastic debris, a variety of things can go wrong. They can lose limbs and cause other mutilations trying to escape it. They can be strangled to death by the debris. If they ingest sharp plastics, it can cause internal organs to rupture. And if they ingest plastic bags, the intestinal blockage it causes can cause starvation due to them being unable to feed. And if a turtle manages to somehow survive all this consumption, their growth can be stunted due to the unnatural buoyancy the ingestion of plastic causes. This side effect leads to lower reproduction rates, and this affects the entire species. And now I'm going to hand it off to Claudia.
So currently there are 7 species of sea turtles that are threatened or endangered to some degree, with some species more at risk than others. And 5 of these species can be found in Florida. These are the loggerhead sea turtle, the leatherback sea turtle, Kemp's Ruby sea turtle, the green sea turtle, the Hacksbill sea turtle. All of these species' survivability is highly affected by a man-made plastics that end up in the oceans. Next slide. The Kemp's Ruby sea turtle is critically endangered, and their home range is along the east coast of the USA. Therefore, they are highly affected by plastic waste, oil and gas drilling. Also, they are at high risk of entanglement in fishing gear, primarily trawling gear. Some facts about these turtles is that they are the rarest and most endangered species in the world. And there's only one major nesting beach in Rancho Nuevo on the Gulf Coast of Mexico. Next slide. The leatherback sea turtle are vulnerable. Some of the threats they have are because of industry, tourism, fishing, and pollution. They are also at high risk of entanglement in fishing gear. And some facts about these sea turtles is that they are primarily pelagic. They can dive deeper and tolerate colder waters. They also consume soft-bodied animals like jellyfishes. Next slide, please. The green sea turtle are endangered. Some of the threats these species has are tourism, recreation, fishing practices. They also tend to consume balloons, plastic bags or plastic pieces. They are also highly affected by fishing lines and nets or other discarded gear. Some facts are that they are named for their green body fat, and they are found in shallow flats and seagrass meadows. Also, the Florida's Atlantic waters are important for feeding and migration pathways for these species. Kate is going to continue these slides.
So the hawksbill sea turtle is critically endangered. The species is also one of the 5 that's found in Florida, but it actually primarily exists in different locations all over the globe. So it doesn't primarily stay in the Florida coast. However, their primary habitat is really close to coastlines and coral reefs. So they're exposed to a pretty high amount of coastal plastic pollution, in addition to open ocean plastics such as plastic bags and balloons. Next slide, please. The loggerhead sea turtle is the last sea turtle that can be found in Florida, and it currently has a vulnerable conservation status. It can be found all over the globe, either in breeding or resident areas, as seen in the map above. The primary risk for the loggerhead turtle is their annual 8,000-mile migrations from different breeding and resident areas that exposes them to highly polluted areas such as the Mediterranean Sea. Some facts include that they got their name from their rather square block-like head, and they are known to consume clams, crabs, and other armored animals. Next slide, please. The olive ridley sea turtle is not found around Florida, but it does stay relatively close to coastlines. Its current status is listed as vulnerable because of its coastal environment. So it's vulnerable to being caught as bycatch as well as plastic ingestion. Human interaction also poses a risk for this turtle species. Next slide, please. Finally, our last sea turtle species is the flatback sea turtle. This species has a vulnerable conservation status, but it also lacks any significant data because of its highly localized habitat around the coastline of Australia. Because of this, the only real data we have is outdated information from the Australian government, so it has that tentative vulnerable status, but it is still at risk from other coastline pollution, such as plastic debris like fishing line, balloons, and plastic bags. And next will be Amaya.
So I'm going to be talking about the importance of sea turtles. So sea turtles' main source of nutrition is seagrass, and by maintaining the health of they maintain the health of the beds by feeding and grazing on the grass, and by keeping it low, they also contribute to the nutrition cycle by releasing nitrogen to the water. In the next slide, I give an example what happens when they don't maintain the seabed. So in this slide, I talk about a species of seagrass that was overconsumed by the population of sea turtles. And when they overconsumed it, it caused slime mold to grow in the seabed. In the next slide. In this slide, I talk about how sea turtles affect the coral reefs. So in this slide, I talk about hawksbill sea turtles, and as mentioned before, they feed on sponges, and by removing the sponges from the coral reefs, they allow for colonization of other organisms. The next slide. In this slide, I talk about the importance of sea turtles and beach dunes. So when they hatch, their eggs provide nutrients such as nitrogen and potassium that help stabilize beach dunes and vegetation. And the health of the vegetation is important because it acts as a source of food for many organisms. Next slide. So this is a slide I also talked about the importance of sea turtles in Florida. And so in this slide, I talk about a study that was performed in northeast shores of Florida, where they found 42 newly born loggerhead sea turtles that had just hatched, and out of the 42, 39 had found plastic inside their systems. Next slide.
Hi, I'm Ellie, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the history of turtles and different laws and policies that are in place to protect the turtles. So the life cycle of turtles starts when female sea turtles lay a nest ranging between 100 and 200 eggs on the beach at night, and depending on the species, the nest will hatch after 40 to 60 days. And then immediately after, the baby turtles crawl as fast as possible to the open ocean. And if they are successful in reaching the ocean, they will spend years following the currents and feeding on small organisms found in algae floating in the water. But unfortunately, only 1 in 1,000 turtles make it to adulthood due to various reasons, and plastic pollution has become one of the most detrimental. And as we stated previously, turtle endangerment began with risks of entanglement in fishing gear and poaching, and has since switched to plastic pollution in the oceans.
Okay,
Next slide, please.
2 minutes left.
Oh, I'll go quick. So in June 2018, thousands of plastic foam cups washed up at the port of Corpus Christi in Texas. And they were styrofoam to-go cups, most of them coming from the popular fast food chain Whataburger. And styrofoam is a huge issue, which is also another name for a chemical compound called polystyrene. And due to the amount of air in its structure, styrofoam is unsinkable and is able to maintain its form. And many marine animals will then mistake it for food, and once consumed, the polystyrene will block their digestive tract, and this leads to starvation. Next slide, please. And so this issue was recognized by President Nixon, who then signed the Endangered Species Act in 1973. And this law requires federal agencies to ensure that actions they authorize, fund, or carry out are not likely to jeopardize the existence of any listed species that are critically endangered. And turtles are protected under the Endangered Species Act, which identifies the hawksbill leatherback, Kemp's Ridley, and green turtle as endangered, and the loggerhead as threatened. So this makes it illegal to import, sell, or travel with turtles. Next slide, please. So there are 2 federal agencies that are responsible for implementing the Endangered Species Act. The National Marine Fisheries Service has authority over the sea turtles in the water, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service controls sea turtles while they're on land. And they also maintain a worldwide list of endangered species. Next slide, please. There are several interest groups, I'll go quick over this, that have kind of taken on the role of protecting turtles from plastic pollution. The major one is the Oceanic Society, and they do this through 2 programs, SWAT, which stands for the State of the World Sea Turtles. They work to compile and publish global sea turtle data that supports conservation efforts at the local, national, and international level. And they also do this through the Marine Turtle Specialist Groups, whose focus is to regularly assess the global risk of extinction for each of the 7 species of sea turtles. And there's also SEE Turtles, which was the first group to bring attention to the issue of ecotourism and how that kind of increases the plastic pollution that is ending up in our oceans. Next slide, please. So there is an increasing societal awareness of the plastic pollution problem. Companies globally have initiated a plastic straw ban to mitigate the amount of plastic that ends up in the ocean, and that is seen through Starbucks, who is the largest coffee house in the world, who aim to eliminate plastic straw use by 2020. And although the plastic lids that they have substituted the straws with actually create more plastic, the plastic straws are very small and lightweight. So when they're going through the mechanical sorter, they're often lost or diverted. So plastic straw gets tossed in the garbage and ends up in a landfill to then pollute the ocean, whereas a larger plastic straw lid has a better chance of being broken down prior to that. Next slide, please. And so some solutions we have, some individual actions that we can do on a daily basis is to obviously reduce, reuse, recycle, heavy emphasis on reduce. And you can do that by using metal straws, avoiding plastic products, like Joseph said before, microbeads in skincare, and really just get involved. Try to organize some beach cleanups, rivers. You can get involved with several foundations such as the Surfrider Foundation, educate others, support sustainable businesses and green policies, and also some more government actions is to enact plastic policies. An example is the plastic bag tax, and to work with other countries for international water management, as that's where plastic accumulates, and also to end fossil fuel subsidies. And we have a photo, oh, sorry, can you go back really quick? A photo of Kate, I believe. Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
It was just, I was a part of a zoology club in high school, and we worked with our local sea turtle watch program for Anna Maria Island, which is really close to my high school. And so we painted yellow stakes for all the nesting sites. So the yellow in that picture is all stakes. That's not a table. Those are like all wooden stakes that we used.
And then, oh, sorry.
Okay, let's try to wrap it up now.
Okay, thank you guys for listening to our presentation. This is a photo of me with an olive ridley turtle, where I had the opportunity to go to Costa Rica and harvest some endangered turtle eggs. So please do your part in protecting our turtles by reducing use of plastic. And then we have our questions on the next slide. Okay, so do I say them right now?
No, that's fine. Just
Okay.
that's fine that they're here, and then you'll send them to me and I'll post them as well. Okay, so time for one or two quick questions from the audience. Anybody with questions?
Yeah, so what do you guys think about the whole, like, that whole straw movement that has been going on, that has been publicized in the recent years, the whole like save the turtles with just straws?
So I don't think that it's going to solve all of our issues at all. But I definitely think it is a step in the right direction. The fact that society and all these big businesses are becoming aware, even if it's something so similar as just switching a straw to another plastic lid, I think the fact that they're aware of this issue and are trying to take those steps to kind of mitigate plastic use, I think is good.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, Turtle Protection Squad. You've lived up to your name and given us a good presentation. So the next up will be Team Tidal. So I'll ask the turtles to mute their cameras and their mics. And Team Tidal, would you please get on board? Team Tidal. Cool. Okay, take it away. Make sure that you're not muted if somebody is speaking, because I don't hear anything.
Okay, I'll introduce it. So we are Team Tidal, and our topic is marine protected areas, and specifically the benefits they have on coral reef ecosystems and ways to help against global warming and other anthropogenic forces. So next slide, please. Okay, so a little basis in marine protected areas, or how it will be referenced throughout it. We just shorten it to MPA. MPAs are protected areas of oceans, estuaries, and freshwater bodies of water around the world. They're created in all areas around the world to reverse the negative impacts that society has inflicted and to help prevent any further damage to them. MPAs have significantly helped areas to prevent overfishing, increase the ability of organisms to reproduce without any anthropogenic forces acting against it, and allow for genetic variation of the system to increase, and in turn, increase the likelihood of a species to survive. Close to 2,000 marine protected areas in the US that educate the public, enhance research, and restore species and ecosystems. Next slide. So I guess I'll just continue on this slide. Coral reefs related to MPAs. Coral reefs are also known as the rainforests of the sea because they're incredibly diverse, and they occupy less than 1% of the ocean floor, but there's an incredible diversity there. They provide marine ecosystems, coastal protections, and economic benefits, including tourism, commercial fisheries, and recreational activities. Coral reefs are home to more than 4,000 fish species, 700 coral species, and many other animal and plant species. North America's only coral barrier reef is around 150 miles long and 4 miles wide. And the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia, it is one of the most popular MPAs that people know of. Protections extend from the skies above the park to beneath the ocean floor, with barrier reefs, fringing reefs, atolls, and patch reefs. And fishing regulations and responsible practices allow an ecological balance between the protection of the reef and economic benefits. Although I will add that the Great Barrier Reef has suffered a lot of coral bleaching over the past years, even though it is an MPA. Next slide.
So I'm going to go a little bit more into the background of the issue, starting with the history of it. So the first noted instance of MPAs were from the indigenous people of Oceania in the late 1800s. They established them in an effort to keep their marine areas sustainable and not be exploited by outsiders, and as well as the indigenous people who established them. However, the earliest formal MPA, meaning that it was like put into policy and everything, is the Fort Jefferson National Monument in Florida, which was established in 1935. The idea of MPAs grew to international attention during the 1962 World Parks Congress on National Parks, which later evolved into a UN declaration in 2002, which called for a worldwide implementation of MPAs by 2012, which was later pushed back to 2020. And I'm sure it's going to be pushed back again, as this year has been a little bit crazy. The largest MPA was established in 1975 between these two events, and that's Australia's Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, which, as Alex has said, has suffered depletion of its coral from its establishment. And they are consistently being established to this day. Recently, I believe one was established in Turkey. Next slide, please. So the policy which encourages the creation of formal MPAs into place is known as the Aichi target. And that was a target set forth by the UN to preserve 10% of the world's ecological resources by the year 2012. Like I said, later set back to 2020. So each nation has different individual laws and policies pertaining to the creation and modification of MPAs. In the United States, this is handled on both federal and state levels, with the main policy involved being the National Marine Sanctuary Act of 1962, which is handled by NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And new laws and policies which act to establish and modify MPAs are constantly being introduced, like the one talked about in Turkey. And yeah, I will hand it off to Kaylee to talk about materials and methods.
So I did materials and methods. So MPAs are obviously found all over the world. So each country kind of has their own way of coming about creating these areas. The study I found was in South China. So the first diagram you see that has like the steps, that's kind of what they went through. You first come up with conservation objectives just to see what you want to accomplish with the protected area. Then they assess the sites based on the conservation objectives to determine which ones are most important. And that way they can kind of prioritize which areas need to be worked on first. One way they can do that is through bathymetry, which is the kind of colorful pictures. They basically just map out the land and the underwater region of these protected areas. And then they evaluate the current management practices for the coral reef system and then all of the surrounding ecosystems, because they're all connected. And then they design a new management system looking at the monitoring network, a legal network, and the management network with a range of protection levels. Next slide. over time, they do have to keep evaluating these areas just to make sure that they are doing what they are meant to do. So they will do this by studying the water chemistry, the biodiversity, and also the resistance that these systems have against natural disasters such as typhoons and hurricanes. You know, they're getting crazier, so they want to make sure that these systems can rebuild themselves after they're damaged. And then you can go on to the next slide. Scientists are continuously checking to see if these MPAs are working. And to do that, like I said before, they look at the biodiversity. So seeing what fish come and which fish go, and then to make sure that the system can sustain itself. If it's sustaining itself, then it's possible that it can help the coral reefs recover faster. Then you can go to the next slide. And then for future research, the biggest thing is that scientists are finding that a lot of these MPAs are failing due to the lack of management, correct management in these systems. So they just want to find better ways to kind of manage these areas to help prevent them from failing in the future. All right, I think Alex, it's your turn again.
Yep, and I'm going to be talking about climate change. And when I say climate change, I mean specific anthropogenic climate change, which means that it is influenced by human activity. And most people just think about global warming, or that's like the general topic, but it's a lot more than that. Although it is a problem that the Earth is warming, there are also problems like ocean acidification, shifting climatic regions, more intense natural disasters, and a loss of biodiversity. And they're all kind of interlocked. So when we release more CO2, the greenhouse effect means that it will gradually warm, but it also means that more CO2 will be dissolved into the water, into the oceans, and it will result in more H+ ions, meaning that the pH will go down. And this is very important for MPAs because corals are very fragile, and because it is a whirlpool, essentially the atmosphere is, MPAs are prone to climate change just like any other place. MPAs are great at minimizing local stress and stuff like that, but climate change can affect them globally. Next slide, please. So many MPAs contain fragile species, like I just said, that are threatened by changes in the environment, such as coral. Increasing temperatures combined with ocean acidification can lead to coral bleaching as the corals expel their zooxanthellae. I can't really pronounce that very well. And in order to protect marine protected areas, action needs to be taken by the US. And I specifically say this because the US is a leading power in industry, yet we are not even joined in the Paris Climate Accord. So I said one way that it could be achieved to mitigate actions is by joining the Paris Climate Accord agreement. And another step to prevent further damage is to increase the amount and size of marine protected areas, which is still happening as there are new marine protected areas that are formed. Local pollution can also be minimized by expanding the boundaries, because if MPAs are close to human civilization, there can be a lot of local pollution there. Next slide, please. So this is a map of all of the countries that have signed or ratified or not signed the Paris Climate Agreement. And as you can see, there are only 3 countries that have not signed or are withdrawing, which includes the United States, Nicaragua, and Syria. And personally, I think that joining the Paris Climate Agreement and just setting boundaries for trying to stop the Earth from moving into a hotter world. And with that, I am done.
So it's very likely that you've seen a marine protected area before without even knowing it. Some of the MPAs in Florida include the North Florida MPA, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and Tortugas Ecological Reserve and National Park. The Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is an important MPA because it protects more than 6,000 species of marine life, mangroves, seagrass beds, historic shipwrecks, and is the world's third largest barrier reef. This MPA covers about 3,800 square nautical miles surrounding the Florida Keys, and some of the biggest accomplishments of this marine sanctuary include Hurricane Irma's impact assessment, the removal of Cuban chugs from islands, habitat mapping surveys, enhancing sanctuary enforcement through partnerships, FIU research, new management ideas, dedicated vessels and aerial patrols of sanctuary waters, and critical wastewater treatment upgrades. You can go ahead to the next slide. Another important MPA in Florida is the Tortugas Ecological Reserve. This MPA includes protected reserves that have increased the number and size of fish populations, corals, and bottom habitats. This area needed MPA classifications because bacteria from the nearby land polluted the waters, killing the corals. Additionally, the fish populations decreased due to commercial and recreational fishing, and this MPA regulation, the MPA regulations prohibits the fishing and anchoring in certain areas, which helps the fish and the coral populations in that area. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll be talking about society, ethics, and morality. So some of the key issues about this is that, sorry, there's a train going by that just decided to be here. So some of the key issues include transparency with the public, accessibility of research and findings of conservation work with the public, respect of culture and traditions, and also balancing long-term success of MPAs with respecting the livelihood of those who rely on them. Next slide, please. So one of the main issues that I just stated was that there needs to be more transparency with the public. So the lack of transparency and accessibility of reports and findings has been a serious problem. And due to this, there's a lack of public understanding, and it's really hard to get the public invested on management and conservation of these areas. So getting local communities invested in the preservation of these marine areas can increase the success of marine conservation projects, because if you do live in an area and you're more invested in creating a better outcome of conservation efforts, then if you understand it better, then that will create a better cooperation between communities and scientists and give people or sort of make people empowered and understand the science of their area and the ecology of their area better, which makes people a little bit more invested in these conservation efforts. So the solution could be creating more simple formatted natural values reports to give to those who don't understand scientific terminology in writing. And so essentially what a natural values report is just a categorization of the different species involved in the area, the different type of biomes, and anything that you can sort of think about that is a different sort of facet in ecological values in marine areas. So sort of just taking those values and making them more accessible would be a really great solution to trying to include the public in this. Next slide.
Okay, you should be wrapping up pretty soon now.
And then also an important thing is that you have to respect the culture and traditions. So to ensure cooperation with those who rely on marine protected areas, you have to respect the regulations, and you need to fully understand the cultures and traditions of the people that you're working with. It's also important to not disregard the traditions that relate to traditional use of the zoning areas and marine protected areas in order to not disregard those important areas and the cultural value that the communities may have. And also the solution to this can be creating a balance between conservation areas while taking into account traditional use of marine areas, and this will ensure a more successful outcome when planning for MPAs. Next slide. And in general, you kind of need a long-term balance, which is a really important thing. So the overall success of an MPA relies on the balance between respecting culture of the area that you're working in and implementing appropriate conservation measures. So consideration of the long-term success over immediate outcome can make a more successful MPA in the long run, and especially when you engage communities who are invested in protecting their marine environments. Next slide.
So wrapping up with the economic factors we're talking about, I'm just gonna be a little choppy and just get up some of the main facts. So through a survey on MPAs, we've determined that the budget range is from $0 to $28 million per kilometer squared. And then that only 13 to 83 of the MPAs surveyed reported that their current funding was sufficient. And this is also going off in non-response bias. And then that the total cost per unit area of running the MPA ranges goes from $4 per kilometer squared to about 30 million per kilometer squared per year. So then if we're looking at quantifying the success of MPAs, we have to kind of go off of what I found is the MPA's overall success evaluation, simplified to MOES, in order to verify the success of an MPA economically through two parts of the evaluation, the Reserve Effectiveness Assessment Index and the Management Performance Assessment Index. The REA index focuses more on the social ecological reserve effect based on biodiversity, fishing, local economy, and cultural identity of the MPA. Moreover, the capital interest of MPAs is best observed through fishing and local, and the local economy factors of calculating the REA index, including, I got so confused. But on the other hand, the MAPA index is more focused on management objectives, including level of surveillance, information awareness of regulations, stakeholder engagement, monitoring and reporting, anthropological threats, financial support, professionalism and competence, personal stability, cultural heritage, and social media communication. And then going on to our questions.
I think we're just gonna, do we need to read them out? I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. You can submit them separate. Just put the other there's 5 questions, right? So go ahead and show the other questions, and then this will be in the, and then send them to me separately, okay? Along with the answers. All right. Well, we'll need to wrap up there. If there's one quick question for MPAs, because we've got about a little bit less than 10 minutes left. Any questions about MPAs from the class? Are there special considerations for plastics in MPAs? I guess that's a question I have. I mean, that was kind of an intersection of the the other report there. Does is there special ways in which plastic pollution is tried to be mitigated in MPAs?
I think that one consideration that people have is land use, like when you're actually considering which areas are going to be needed for specific usage. So I guess if there's lots of humans in one certain area to where there might be a little bit more pollution, there might be a little bit more monitoring and special focus devoted to that area where there's more of a human impact kind of disturbing the environment. So I guess in general, the way that people interact with their environment and where the highest concentration of people are is widely used, especially like within mapping. When you create maps for these areas, usually that's always something that we like to include or at least reference, which is the human population.
I guess Hannah Franz has a question. She asks, does the current administration, has there been any recent impact from the management strategies of the Trump administration for MPAs?
So I will say there's definitely been a fair amount of indirect impact given the rollbacks on like environmental precautions in the like methane and Clean Air Acts and Clean Water Acts. There have been rollbacks on all of them. So that has definitely affected MPAs directly. I'm not sure if there's any specific policy regarding MPAs that has been based on a federal level. It's more based on a state level, it seems like recently, that has affected MPAs. And I think the only thing that I can think of is like Everglades, but I don't even think that's considered.
Okay. I did get a notice in my email just today saying that Congress, the Senate and the House have restored the budget cuts that President Trump had proposed for the ocean sciences, and in that restoration was included management efforts that would help support MPA. So there was an attempt to defund that, but then that was overridden by Congress, at least so far. Okay, well, I think we're going to thank the team Tidal for their presentation and everybody. And I just wanted to make a few comments. I think we've gotten off to a great start with the teams that have presented today. Just a few things, if we have to do 4 presentations a day, it's going to really put a bit of a strain on timing. So make sure that you work on, maybe cut down the number of slides so that you don't go over time. It will take off a bit if you go over time. You need to work on that. It's a good idea to have an introduction slide that tells what's coming. You don't spend a lot of time on that slide, but it's helpful there because then people know what to expect. And let's see, I will share a screen that shows the elephant elephant conservation presentation, if I can find that screen. Let's see. There it is. Okay.
Professor, how much
Yeah.
time will the groups going on Tuesday have? I don't know how many groups are going, so I wanted to know if it would be 15 minutes still.
Yeah, well, I think we have 4 groups, and that'll be 15 minutes. But that allows a little bit of time for questions and everything. So 15 minutes, and that's basically what I was giving everybody today, but adding a little bit onto that. All right, so here are the questions that the team asked. I've removed the answers there, and so these will be posted. The questions will be posted on in Canvas when I get all the copies. So the teams that presented today should please send me their questions as a text file or Word file, and I'll post them to Canvas.
Professor, I don't think we're looking at the questions. We're looking at something else.
Oh, really?
We're looking at 2 research documents, I think.
Okay, wait a minute. How's that? Are you seeing the bad beaches?
Okay, sweet. Yeah, that's their quiz.
Okay, great. So you got it, Professor. You got my email. You got the quiz questions.
Okay, I'll make sure that I have it. So yeah.
And no, I'm looking at them. I just wanted to ask about the turning in the presentations. Do you want us to turn them in now that we've presented? Since I see that the due date is still December 8th for everybody, but
yeah, you can totally turn them in now. That's fine, and we'll go ahead and grade them and just get it out of the way. I just didn't want.
Okay, I just thought you wanted if it was a requirement or nothing, but
no. Well, you just have to do it by the due date, but you can always turn things in ahead of time.
Okay,
it's always a good idea. Okay, any other questions for the class? Again, good job by the presenters today, and I thought you moved well between the topics, and it was pretty smooth. It was possible to hear everybody. Let's see. The chat says I will send around. Logan asks, how do we know which team goes first? I'll send around a program for everybody, and I'll send everything out. So you'll get that via Canvas as an announcement. Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the presentations and the work that you put into that. I look forward to seeing the reports, and I will be putting in the grade, the presentation grade, and the rubric will be available here shortly, because I've been taking notes as we've been going on. Okay, any other questions? No other questions? All right, everybody, have a great Thanksgiving. Please be safe. Please be thankful. Enjoy your time with your family, but be careful and try to take care of yourselves. Be safe. Wear a mask. We love you.
Thank you. You too, Professor. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice break.
Thank you.